Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the Policy Development and Review Committee meeting for the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District on June 4th, 2025. I am Director Pettingill, the Vice Chair of this committee, and filling in for Director Rainbow, who will be joining us shortly. Start by calling this meeting to order and recognize that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Lillooet Nation. I myself am connecting from the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish-Lillooet. And with that, I will call for someone like to move approval of the agenda. Councillor Stoner moves, Director Stoner, Director Ford moves and seconds. Thank you. All those in favor? That's accepted. And we don't have a closed meeting at this point, if I'm correct. There's nothing to rise and report on. Next, we are on to our consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like to pull? Not seeing anyone. Would someone like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Director Ford, a second by Director Birch Jones. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And next we are on to the respectful workplace policy. I believe this is going to Director Belsham. Is that correct? Or Director Haletsky?
Will be presenting this report. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Monica Halitsky, Human Resources Manager at the SLRD. So this is a new respectful workplace policy being presented, and this policy will essentially, the proposed policy will essentially be replacing the existing workplace bullying and harassment policy and procedures that is currently in place at the SLRD. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Director Birch Jones.
No, I read it through and I think it's perfectly fine. I don't have any questions or comments. Thank you, Monica.
Okay, I did have a couple. The one thing I was wondering, so if the CAO or HR person is not available, it says the chair will lead an investigation. Norm, is that not correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So if there needs to be an investigation, and
No.
the
Hold on. Sorry for interrupting you. Chris, Chair, Chris, we're just okaying the communication and social media policy, right? Pages 6
oh,
and 7. I'm catching up to you. Right? We're on 7.1.
sorry.
I have lots of comments on 7.2.
So I have 7.1 as the respectful workplace policy.
Am I on the right agenda? No.
No,
I am
I
not
think
on. Oh my goodness.
you have the April 2nd agenda.
I have all my beautiful notes from the April 2nd agenda. You guys are going to have to give me a couple minutes to bring up the correct agenda, and I really apologize.
Okay. But I thought I was way off there, so
Ooh
okay.
la.
That's good.
Sorry.
I will.
Okay. I'll get it together here and I apologize.
Okay, and I'll just continue with my questions, maybe buy you a bit of time. So, if the CAO or HR manager is not available, then the board will, or sorry, the chair will be the investigator. But typically, as a board, like we operate as a board, and so I was wondering if it should be the board or committee of the board rather than the chair in this case. And I'm just wondering, I know in certain cases, a mayor, for example, has semi-judicial powers, which can be important sometimes in this sort of thing. And is that why it's the chair, or is this where we should consider maybe again? It seems we normally operate as a board.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my understanding is, so the proposed policy, and I think it's laid out in or set out in page 12 of the package, but it's just the investigative procedures. And this is related to complaints where someone has been disrespectful towards an employee. The investigator is the HR manager, subject to the following. If the HR manager is the target or respondent, the investigator is the CAO. And if the CAO is the target or respondent, the board chair is the investigator. Or if there's some other situation where it's deemed complex or something like that, the board chair is the investigator. And again, I think if it is something that's sensitive or complex, there is the opportunity to bring it to the board chair, but it's not specifically laid out in this policy. So that may be something that we want to put a little bit more detail in the policy.
Yeah, Director Ford, then Director Stoner.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there needs to be, I think this is really important part of this policy, so that there's a very clear process from to simplify and destigmatize, and allow people to make these complaints and feel safe within, within their capacity. In Whistler, the process is that it would go to the chair of the governance committee, like the HR and governance committee, which is a standing committee of council. And if that person were the source of the complaint, then the alternate is the mayor. So I think, yes, you're right, Director Pettengill, that we do operate as a board, but there needs to be a point of contact that simplifies that sort of first step of the complaint, and then the investigation would begin. I think it could be written into the language how the investigation would be conducted by that one point of contact. Like that person has maybe one or two other people that they would share the load with, because having one person sort of be the point of contact can be a lot. And if that one person is the source, then there needs to be an alternate. So I think you're right. The language needs to be a little bit clearer. I'm sure we can come to that. Not really. Yeah, I guess I hope that's helpful.
Director Stoner.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Appreciate the discussion on this. I think having a third bullet there would be helpful. I'm just trying to think in a situation where the CAO is the target or the respondent, or the board chair is the respondent. So there's also an element here of like ensuring that the CAO who reports to the board has a mechanism for submitting a complaint. And I'm not sure, Monica, would that just go to you?
So if the board chair is the target, that would follow the proposed code of conduct procedures. If the CAO is the target or respondent, the board chair is the investigator. Now, if the board chair is the person engaging in or is the respondent, then per this policy, the CAO would go to the HR manager, but that may want to review that process, and maybe there is another process where it goes to the board as a whole.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just, or if it may is the vice chair. Like, I'm just trying to think of like worst case scenario. I think putting it to you, Monica, could work, or whoever is in your role. So I don't want to personalize this, but whoever is in the HR role, I also just want to recognize that might put the HR manager in a pretty awkward position. So I don't know if that's entirely fair. And so if we just kick it immediately to like a third party investigator, but that's one that I'll just mull on a little bit. The other piece that I was just curious about in the responsibilities section, I really appreciate this section, and I'm just curious if in this section, is the board considered a supervisor or a manager, given that we're technically the manager of the CAO, or are we not considered in that list?
I mean, this policy is really based on the requirements, WorkSafe BC's requirements, and the definition of supervisor, like elected officials are technically not under the definition of supervisors and managers. It's really just employee, like supervisors and managers who are employees. There could be an additional point there that responsibility for board members or elected officials.
Yeah, I don't want to overly convolute this, and I appreciate that this is very much an employee-focused like policy. And I do also want to ensure that whoever is sitting in the CAO position does have some level of protection under this policy as well, because that is our legal right or our legal responsibility as a board. To our one employee. So I think that adding some language under that section that identifies the responsibility of the board as the supervisor or manager of the CAO would be helpful clarity to add.
Thank you.
Just chime in on the last point. I guess my sort of expectation is that if the HR manager and CAO wasn't available for whatever reason, that it would be the sort of, in practical terms, an appointee or committee appointed by the board as opposed to the whole board, but just sort of articulating somehow that the board is responsible, even though in practical terms, the whole board isn't going to deal with the thing probably. And I guess that's sort of where my mind is at. And others will add their thoughts. Director Rainbow, we are on 7.1. Discussing the respectful workplace policy. Should I hand the chair back over to you at this point?
Would you continue, please? It'd be, I think, easier for everyone.
Okay. I did have a couple other things because I haven't seen additional hands yet. I was wondering about, I don't know if whistleblower is quite the right term, but what happens in a case where you observe sort of inappropriate behavior and the person who is the target, maybe for whatever reason, is not complaining? Do you have an obligation or even an ability to make a complaint, or what's the expectation there?
Thank you. Yeah, so with this new proposed policy, everyone is responsible for reporting any incidents of disrespectful conduct. So this policy really is strengthening our efforts to enhance that respectful workplace culture. And through the policy, it is specified that there is a responsibility for everyone to, if they witness that type of behavior, that they bring it forward per the procedures in the policy.
Okay, and I guess maybe some of the language around target then, because it seemed like it was the target that was moving it through. But if you're not the recipient of the behavior. I guess maybe that was just the language thing that confused me in a few places. I may have also just read it too quickly.
Is there a specific section where it may be confusing that I can make note of that and just
I would have to follow up with you on that.
okay.
That was just sort of a general impression. I'm just watching for hands here. Uh, I didn't see anything. Again, I read reasonably quickly, but in the code of conduct, there's a fair bit on confidentiality. In here, is it just sort of a given that this is all confidential, or do we need to articulate that?
Um, I don't think we don't provide specific procedures with respect or information with respect to what extent confidentiality will be maintained. And I think in order to, through the investigative procedures, in order to properly investigate a complaint, it unfortunately, we may not be able to maintain full confidentiality. So that's definitely something that we could add to the policy and just clarify, when a complaint is being brought forward, it may not necessarily, like full confidentiality may not be able to be maintained by, or the confidentiality of the person bringing forward the complaint. If once the complaint is being investigated in terms of fairness, the person who's responding will have to know like where that complaint is coming from.
Okay.
So we can definitely add some verbiage and guidelines for that in the policy.
Yeah. And was it on this point, Director Paul or CIO Paul?
Yes, thank you. It was, just wanted to clarify between anonymity and confidentiality. All personnel, this is a personnel HR issue, and the confidentiality of FOIs and all that, like it is definitely a confidential process. Anonymity might not always be, couldn't be assumed, I guess is.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, I was confused. So, the investigation remains confidential. Like some elements of the investigation remain confidential. But anonymity may not be able to be maintained. If someone's bringing forward a complaint or there's specific details that need to be looked at and brought forward through the investigation, there's full confidentiality won't be able to be maintained, but anonymity, yeah, I mean, depending on the situation. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, I was just curious about training for staff on the new policy. And so, sorry if this is getting ahead of ourselves, but like kind of the next steps here. And in particular around training for the investigative process. Like this is a pretty substantive piece of work if you do ever have to go through it. And so I just want to make sure that there's enough support for those who would be tasked as an investigator to have the confidence to do that work.
Yeah. There's always opportunity to, strengthen skills in investigations. And yeah, internally, like, we do through the HR function, there is opportunity to undertake that training and further develop those skills because it can be a very complex process. So yeah, I mean, there are resources for that. And it's not only human resources per the policy that conducts those investigations, but also the CAO. And so, yeah, internally we do have resources to undertake training in that regard. In terms of training employees on the proposed new policy, there is intention once the policy is adopted to source training likely through an external provider, but also just communicating the policy, rolling it out, and just really making sure that employees are aware of the policy and doing that training on the policy.
Director Ford?
Thank you. Back to the confidentiality, anonymity, privacy. I think there needs to be a little bit of each step is really clearly outlined, but what it doesn't talk about is how the outcome is shared and to whom. So if an employee complains about another employee and the investigation takes place and the outcome is, that it gets resolved, is that then being communicated out to the rest of the staff? I think it will be case by case, but I think having a clear understanding of, that this issue was identified, taken seriously, resolved, and we're moving on. And I know that will be up to the supervisor of that target as well as the CAO as to when and how it gets communicated. But I think if it gets communicated to the board, that would obviously be kept confidential from an HR perspective. I think that there's a line that we need to be clear on in the event that the person being targeted, so say it's an employee and they're being harassed by an elected official, if that elected official is found to be in breach of this code, that would then fall under the code of conduct for elected officials. And so then how is that being communicated to the public? Because then that actually puts that staff member in a spotlight as well, if it is going out to the community. So just having some sort of flow chart of how and when or if it gets communicated to the public. And then the other one is if a member of the public is targeting one of our staff, what the remedies for that are, so that the public knows that, because I think that this is a really important communication piece that, our organization doesn't take harassment of anyone, and we take it seriously, but there has to be some way of keeping that employee's privacy while also communicating that the remedy was taken. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm not sure, I'd have to refer to the proposed code of conduct, but if it's an elected official that's engaging in disrespectful conduct, the procedures would refer to the code of conduct procedures. And I'm not sure how the results of the investigation would be communicated, but through this proposed respectful workplace policy, it does lay out on page 7 of the policy that a copy of the completed investigation form will not be provided to the complainant or respondent. However, the complainant and respondent will be advised in writing. So typically this would happen or has been happening via an email communication of, a summary of the relevant findings, recommendations, remedies, and then the timeline for implementation to resolve the complaint. And so that information will be provided to the complainant and the respondent. I'm not sure what the if there are any procedures that are laid out in the code of conduct. And with respect to a member of the public engaging in disrespectful conduct, we follow the procedures in the policy, but maybe we can strengthen that by also having some additional communication efforts, like a page on our website with that states we don't tolerate disrespectful behavior. We already have a copy of our policies online on our website, but maybe a separate web page showcasing that. And typically, if it's a complaint involving an employee, like that's usually not public, but because it would be if it is involving an elected official, yeah, I'm not sure in what situation that would come out in a public forum, but yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any comments on that.
I'll go to CIO Paul.
Thank you. I spoke with Director Belsham and Ms. Helinski have been speaking about this because we did anticipate that there would be some bleed through on these two items. So Director Belsham is here and can clarify on those items. They are working together about the code of conduct response.
And thank you. Through the chair, Angela Belsham, Director of Legislative and Corporate Services. In the board code of conduct, there is a section outlining adjudication and reporting, which is provision 29. And again, it is dependent on the situation, but there are some clear parameters associated with once the investigation comes to close, how it will be reported to the respondent, to the board, and then to the public. And again, it is, if it is something that involves an employee, anonymity would be incredibly important. But we do have clear outlined provisions as to how we would be reporting that out to the public when it comes to an elected official breaching code of conduct.
And CIO Paul, is that a new hand or?
Sorry, no, I'll lower it.
Okay. Not seeing any more hands. I had one last item and a bit of an internal debate on this one because part of me says this is self-evident, but the other piece is because, social conflict is so challenging. I see some value in articulating every single step. And the one piece I wondered, it does speak to sort of an encouragement for an informal resolution sort of out of the gate, which makes a fair bit of sense to me. But I didn't see a piece like if I feel like or I'm uncertain, I feel uncomfortable. Can I go to my supervisor or should I go to my supervisor to talk it through with them before making a complaint? Is that sort of an expected or encouraged piece of the process, or maybe it's just obvious that I would do that?
Yeah, I think that is a suitable approach, and it is laid out in 8.3 of the proposed policy. If an individual doesn't feel comfortable approaching the individual who is engaging in the disrespectful behavior, they can seek support from their manager or human resources in addressing the matter informally.
Okay, I think that's close enough to what I was thinking about. Okay, not seeing any more hands. We did have some discussion about is the board chair the appropriate fallback if the CAO and HR manager are unavailable? Did we want to add anything there, or are we ready for a resolution? Director Ford?
Yeah, I think that given the responsibility of the board chair, it's certainly an appropriate fallback. And there's a lot of good reasons that it should be the board chair. And I think, for myself, I would likely bring in the vice chair as well, as a second person to lean into. So I think keeping that less complicated and having some options there, it makes sense.
So
Ms.
I would,
Letsky? Oh,
Sorry, I was trying to raise my hand and I couldn't find the button. So I just wanted to clarify the procedures for when the board chair is assigned as the investigator. Do we want to expand on that? Or just leave it as is? Like board chair may involve vice chair if, or wider board if deemed at the board chair's discretion, or
oh, I'm seeing some different nods and some. I'll go to Director Stoner because I saw a hand and then go from there.
my suggestion would be that we just leave the steps of the complaint and the investigation as is. We just add a third bullet that identifies the investigator as this is on page 12 of the report. The investigator is a human resource manager subject to the following: if the HR manager is the target, if the second bullet is if the CAO is a target. And then that already identifies the board chair as the investigator. And so I don't think we necessarily need anything further unless we want to provide a third option where if the board chair is
engaging in.
the respondent.
Yeah,
And
and then it would refer to the code of conduct, which I think in that situation, it's the corporate officer.
That would be right. Great. So I actually don't know if we need to add anything there.
Okay. I'm not seeing strong support for any changes there at the moment. So
I would be happy to make the motion of the staff recommendation with one minor change to including some language that identifies the board under section 6.2, which is supervisors and managers.
hey, do we have a seconder there? Director Ford seconds. I do want to speak to it. Director Stoner?
Yeah, just briefly, thanks to staff for the work on this and bring our respectful workplace policy up to date. Our previous one was good, but it was also a little bit outdated. And so I appreciate the additional work here. I think it is a strong policy as is. And I think this, in tandem with the subsequent conversation we're going to have around code of conduct, puts our organization in a really good place to ensure that we are delivering on a safe and respectful workplace for all, and articulating the expectation thereof for everybody to play their part in ensuring that that is the reality. So thanks for the work and happy to support as presented.
Okay, not seeing any other hands. I'll just add, yes, thank you. I appreciate actually being able to read this in tandem with the code of conduct because they are closely related. And I did have some questions and some things. I find you can very easily go down a million rabbit holes in this sort of policy, and so I wanted to just poke at a few things. But this is, I think, probably one of those ones where you have to try it out and see what works and what doesn't. And I think what we have here is a significant improvement and some good changes from what we have, and so happy to support this and move forward and adjust in the future if necessary. So thank you. With that, I will call the question. Anyone opposed? So that carries. And I think now's a good time to turn the chair back over to Director Rainbow. Director Belsham.
Thank you, Chair. Before moving on, can I also get a recommendation to the regional board that the board repeal policy number 5.3, which was the previous workplace bullying and harassment policy and procedures?
Yes, I will move that. Does someone second that? Director Ford, any discussion? Seeing none, anyone opposed? No, that carries. Thank you. And now I will turn over the chair to Director Rainbow.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I do apologize for not being here on time today. So we're on 7.2. Request for decision, review of draft code of conduct bylaw number 1898/2025. And yeah, you're going to speak to us.
Hello,
Please.
I'm Gail Harris, Legislative Coordinator with the SLRD. I'm here to present the updated Code of Conduct bylaw for the committee's consideration. The updates are based on the feedback and comments provided from the committee at their April meeting. As noted in the report, the changes are that the definition of a member has been expanded to include members of select committees. So this means any appointees or volunteers to all committees of the SLRD are included. The definition of an investigator has been amended to include internal and external appointment for clarification. The proposed bylaw has been updated to include any election campaigning rather than just municipal elections. And then regarding directors' remuneration in the event of a breach, staff are proposing that the directors' remuneration bylaw includes specific amounts for any reduction in remuneration in the event of a breach. The proposed reduction, as outlined in the report, is consistent with the member municipality bylaws of the Village of Pemberton, District of Squamish, and the Resort Municipality of Whistler. An update to the current director's remuneration bylaw 1501 is planned for fall of 2025, at which time that would be included in an updated bylaw. Alternatively, an amendment to the existing bylaw could be brought back to the board at an earlier date if the committee prefers. Director Belsham and I are here for any questions.
Hey, thank you. Any questions? Comments? Silence is deafening. Oh, there's a hand. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. The only thing that, and this came from looking at the workplace. I've already forgotten the title. The one we just did is in that one. It sort of strongly encouraged at least an informal resolution out of the gate. With the code of conduct right now, it goes through an investigation. If the investigator determines that's the best path, they might sort of encourage that, but it's sort of the informal piece comes further down the path. And I can actually see some reasons why we wouldn't want to push too hard on informal. But to the degree, I think in many cases that does make sense. And so I wondered if we should be more upfront or explicit of trying to work it out informally. I think my experience over the last few years is that sometimes when people see these policies, they have an expectation of, if anything feels uncomfortable, I should jump to the policy and the complaints process as a first step, as opposed to informal as a first step. It doesn't seem to everyone it's always clear about what the preferred mechanism is. And so I did wonder if informal is our preferred mechanism, if it's worth being more explicit about that.
Yeah, through the chair, yes, we could be more explicit. It is in there that to be an informal process would be first, if possible, to discuss the situation with the other board member or with the person. But if it wanted to be more highlighted, it could be, yeah. No, sorry, it's Belsham. Director Belsham, sorry.
Yeah, so currently under the implementation and preliminary steps, provision 21.1, it does state that if a member believes that they have observed another member engaging in conduct that would breach this bylaw, they must attempt to resolve the complaint directly with the other member, if possible, prior to submitting a complaint under section 24. Certainly encouraged to move through an informal process. But we can certainly strengthen that language if that's the wish of the committee.
Chris, yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed that 21.4. I guess that was the piece I was missing. I thought I only saw the piece of that happened only at the sort of direction of the investigator. So if, as long as we do have that explicitly, then I'm comfortable, I think.
Yeah, I think it's quite well said there.
Which one was that, Andrew? 21 point?
21.1.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Jenna,
I'll move the staff recommendation, seeing no further questions. Happy to speak to it if it's seconded.
I'll second that.
I didn't see.
Just another thanks to staff. This is, I think, the second or the third time that we've seen the code of conduct policy. And so this to me reflects the changes that we provided or requested last time. And I don't have any further edits at this point. I think it's a strong document. As you said, it mirrors the things that we've seen in the member municipalities. I think which was the intention as we set out to do this, was to try and minimize the amount of work for staff by copying and pasting as much as possible. And I do think we've also done our due diligence in making sure that it's applicable to the regional district perspective. And I think that with holding off on doing the changes to remuneration bylaw for the next few months, given that there is an update coming in the fall anyways, feels okay at this time. But if for whatever reason that project does get pushed off beyond the fall of 2025, then I would encourage us to come back no later than the end of this year. So that would be my only caveat, but otherwise happy to see this go to the board. Thanks for the work.
Thank you. I didn't, did you get a second for that? We did, good, okay. Any other comments? Okay, so I'll call a question. All in favour? Opposed? No opposed, motion carries. Thank you. So. Do we have any late business? Late business? I guess that brings us to number 10. Director Stoner, seconded by Director Burns Jones. All in favour? We are